Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining today's webinar on the Worker Protection Act. My name is Arad Parsi. I'm Director of Business Development and Partnerships at the Suzy Lamplugh Trust, and we're delighted to be hosting this important webinar session for you today. It's been designed to give you clear, practical guidance on the Act, empowering you and your organizations on your journey to compliance. Just a quick housekeeping note before we begin. This webinar is being recorded, and after the session, you will receive access to the full recording, and subsequently, we will also send out shorter topic-based snippets of the session. If you have any questions during the webinar, please use the chat or the Q&A function, and we'll address as many of those as possible. Anything that we don't get to answer, we will have that included in a follow-up email. Right. Before we dive in, I would like to just briefly introduce the work of the Suzy Lamplugh Trust and our valued partners, PeopleSafe, as both the organizations are very dedicated to supporting safer workplaces. The Suzy Lamplugh Trust is the UK's founding personal safety charity and leading authority on stalking. We were established in 1986 after the tragic disappearance and murder of state agent, 25-year-old state agent Suzy Lamplugh, who went missing and has never been found. For nearly 4 decades, we've led various national efforts to reduce workplace violence, harassment, sexual harassment, stalking, and a range of other unwanted and harmful behaviors through accredited training, expert consultancy projects, and other activities, things like frontline support and campaigning activities. We also operate the National Stalking Helpline, which has supported over 90,000 victims since 2010. Our partner, PeopleSafe, is the world's largest provider of employee safety technology. Their service offers a 24/7 protection initiative for workers wherever they are, integrating safety apps, devices, and all connected to a dedicated control center, what we call an alarm receiving center. Together, the partnership combines our expertise in personal safety strategy, policy, training, and so forth with PeopleSafe's industry-leading technology, offering organizations a holistic approach to preventing and managing a range of harmful behaviors in the workplace. We're all ready to start and get on with the speaker's thoughts. Before we do, though, we would like to run a very quick poll, and I'd like to ask Russell if we can share that poll, please. That's just being shared with you now. Russell, do you want to let me know when we have the responses? I don't seem to be able to see anything on my screen.
I've just had it confirmed it's closed for you there, Arad.
It is closed. Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you for sharing your answers with us. There are various stats out there, of course, when you look at different sources. According to the HR and legal consultancy WorkNest, only about 5% of businesses are well prepared. 36% say that they're in early stages, and 58% say that they still have some work to do. If you look at other stats and other research from the likes of Cultural Shift, for example, that puts the percentage of those who don't feel equipped at 61%. And they also report, Cultural Shift, that 45% of UK businesses are still unaware of the Act. So hopefully we're in a good place to be able to provide you with some key information and some empowering information. With that established, I'd like to hand you over to my colleague, Catherine McLaughlin, Deputy CEO, Director of Services and Development at the Trust. Catherine is going to help us better understand the legislative landscape, provide an overview of the Worker Protection Act, explaining its origins, and how the work of the Trust supported and contributed to consultations, which eventually led to this critical and decisive legislation. Catherine, over to you.
Thanks, Arad, much appreciated. As Arad said, I'm the Director of Services and Development and Deputy CEO at the Trust, so I look after all of our frontline services, which are predominantly around supporting victims of stalking, particularly in London, but also our national service. But I also head up our policy and campaigns team, who really since the start of the Trust have been instrumental in trying to bring our kind of mission and values to life, because we believe that everyone should be and feel safe in their homes, communities and workplaces. And we know that this isn't true for everyone, and we want to work together to make that a reality. So legislation like the Worker Protection Act is part of the Trust's commitment to creating safer workplaces and safer communities. We began work on the legislation, if you could swap slides for me, please, in 2019 as part of a coalition with the Trade Unions Congress called This Is Not Working Alliance. And then we worked really, really closely with Vera Hobhouse with a private members bill in 2022. As always, we know that the creation of legislation is a messy and difficult business and requires lots of compromises. So we worked really closely with Vera, and we had hoped that the legislation initially would protect people from all forms of harassment. And although lots of the elements were supported by the government and came in with the Worker Protection Bill, some of those additional requirements were essentially watered down or deleted as the bill made its tortuous way through the various select committees and other processes. So finally, we got royal assent for the Worker Protection Bill in October 2023, and it came into force in October 2024. So in fact, we're almost a year into this legislation now in terms of enforceability. And I think it is still quite clear that not everyone has really got to grips with what it means. I think one of the key features that other panelists will go into much more detail, we want workplaces that treat people with respect, and particularly where third parties are expected to do the same. And Vera Hobhouse spoke really eloquently that at the moment, the hurdles employees have to jump through to hold their employees to account for failing to protect them for harassment are just too high, and victims often feel very silenced. So I think the key features for me, this is all about preventing sexual harassment. It's about creating workplaces where it doesn't happen, that it's not tolerated, that both employees, customers, third parties are absolutely clear about the values that an organisation brings to work. And in essence, we have to be able to demonstrate these reasonable steps. It's not enough to take action when something has occurred. You need to be able to show that you've got eyes on this, that you've understood the risks, and that you are taking meaningful and practical actions to keep staff safe. And really importantly, there's a compensatory uplift. So if reasonable steps are not taken, that can essentially increase that compensation by up to 25%. So there are many reasons, both kind of, we think, ethical and also practical, to take this really seriously. It might feel a little bit overwhelming at this point, but I'm sure the rest of the panel are going to walk you through the really meaningful and practical steps you can take, and how to understand the risk you're currently running and how to really effectively bring that risk down. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that, Catherine. That was really helpful and informative. And I'm sure if there are any questions about that process, then we can bring those back to you at the end of the presentations, at the Q&A part of the webinar. Right. We're now going to go over to Jayden Kramer, Associate Employment Law Specialist at Blake Morgan, one of UK's leading law firms. Jayden is going to analyse the legal implications of the Worker Protection Act. I do apologise, I'm getting a little bit of an echo, but I hope that will go away. Jayden is also going to look at the considerations and the actions that are required for organisational compliance. So thank you for giving us your time and sharing your expertise with us, Jayden, and over to you.
Thank you, Arad, and good morning, everyone. So as Arad said, I'll be talking about more of the legal boring stuff. but if it gets a bit too much, then just pop it in the chat and we can kind of have more of a discussion about it. But really, I'm here to discuss what the compliance elements are, the legal elements of the Act, and kind of what I thought would be best for this kind of format and the time that we have is if we start with what's on the table right now, what we should be doing, and what we should be looking forward to in the future. So some of it has been touched on already, and some of it will be touched on further by the other panelists. But as we stand at the moment, there is the Worker Protection Act, which is an amendment to the Equality Act, and essentially employers must take reasonable steps to prevent sexual harassment of workers. So sexual harassment in terms of the current legislation is defined as unwanted conduct of a sexual nature which has the purpose of or effect of violating someone's dignity or creating an intimidating, hostile, degrading, humiliating or offensive environment. And as mentioned, since the 26th of October 2024, the Worker Protection Act has introduced a preventative duty. So the shift has been from moving away from this, we have a problem, let's deal with the problem, to what problems should we be anticipating and how do we stop those problems from becoming problems at all. So that's really the main shift that we've seen coming through. Importantly, and as mentioned, there is an uplift. So part of the legislative landscape has changed to bring about a 25% or up to a 25% uplift if you're found to have breached the preventative duty. So importantly, it's not a standalone claim. There's no claim that an employee may bring at this stage that says you failed to take these steps. It is only where the courts or the tribunals have found that there was harassment, and in those instances where harassment has been found and compensation has been awarded, you are then allowed to be awarded up to 25% more. The other kind of important aspects is that the EHRC has also now been given more enforcement powers, so they can investigate, they can issue unlawful act notices, they can enter binding agreements, and even seek injunctions. So those are also quite important to be aware of, and often I think they got less attention than some of the other aspects, but I think they're of equal importance. And so essentially what we're saying is that the preventative duty isn't optional. It's something that's enforceable right now, and it has real financial and reputational consequences. In terms of what we should be doing, there are various views on what we should be doing and what reasonable steps are, what practical steps should be taken. Again, the EHRC has provided 8 steps that they think are the kind of key steps that you should be taking to make your workplace a safer place for purposes of this discussion. So I'll just touch on those. So the first one is develop an effective anti-harassment policy. This needs to be a clear, accessible, zero tolerance policy, but it should also be a living document that staff know about. It changes, and all of these 8 steps kind of flow with each other. They interact with each other, and it's kind of a moving pyramid of tasks that you'd have to do. The second is to engage your staff. So staff need to know what these policies are, that these policies exist, what sexual harassment is. They need to be exit interviews. You need to take cognizance of what's happening within your workspace. Number 3 is probably the most important, and I always like to actually say that this should be number 1, which is awareness and reduce risk. So this is part of a tailored risk assessment. And it's interesting because this is actually something that employers have had to do for around 20 years now. There's been this requirement to do a risk assessment within businesses, but now it's actually being enforced, and I think we're going to see a lot more uptake on that, which is great. But that is really one of the key things that has come into play. The fourth is set up reporting systems. Again, it's not just a reporting system. It is a confidential, anonymous, and multi-tiered reporting system. Training must be regular, tailored, and again, it would have to be specific to what's going on in your organization. It can't be a blanket training. It needs to actually address what's happening in your organization. There's also handling complaints effectively. This means that they need to be sensitive. They need to deal with the real kind of problems that are faced and take reasonable steps to deal with those. As we will touch on a little bit more, there is now an element of dealing with third-party harassment. So while this is not necessarily part of the legislation just yet, it is something that we have to take cognizance of under the EHRC guidance. And the last one is to monitor and evaluate. So again, a living document, living practices, living training. You have to make sure that you carry on doing what you're supposed to be doing. The one thing that I will point out, and this goes back to the point that I made earlier, is that one of the most important things is having that risk assessment, and the EHRC has issued guidance that says that if you haven't done a risk assessment, it's very unlikely that you would be found to have complied with the preventative duty. So that should really be your starting point. The other point that's just worth mentioning on that is the law, the legislation, the EHRC have also said that they don't expect this to be, again, it's not a tick box exercise. It's also not supposed to put employers under massive amounts of pressure that would be undue pressure. It would have to be something that is tailored to the size of your organization, the resources of your organization, the level that you operate at, and the people that you're interacting with. So it's not one size fits all. A mom and pop shop is not going to have the same responsibilities as a national leading retailer who employs underage people. So those are things that you also need to take into account. And then the second element that I just want to drill down on those 8 points is the training. So policies mean very little without the awareness of those policies and what's actually going on in the business. So everyone at every level needs to be trained on what's going on in the current legislation, and what to look out for, what sexual harassment is, or what harassment is in general, and how to report it, how to deal with it. So training is one of the key elements. And actually, this is something that Blake Morgan and the Susie Lampley Trust have been working on for almost a year now, since the Act went live, is developing training that is tailored to compliance with this particular Act. So really what I've decided is the most important thing, is the training element that flows through the rest of it. The last points, quickly, just to finish off, is where we're heading to now. And it's worth mentioning that the Employment Rights Bill is soon to be coming into force. That will also have an impact on what we're doing now. So at the moment, it's set to come on the 26th of April, October, and 2027. Various pieces come in at various times. For our purposes, it's next year, October, is kind of, well, the purpose of this talk next year, October, is going to be the main thrust of it. And the main thing that's going to happen there is that the law is going to change from what we have now, which is reasonable steps, to taking all reasonable steps. Now, we have no idea what all reasonable steps means in the context of harassment in the workplace. So, for example, something that I've had to deal with advising clients is you could take 100 steps, but if there was one step that you did not take that a tribunal then considers reasonable, you would have failed in your preventative duty, and you would have failed under the new kind of guidelines. So it's important that companies have a clear idea of all reasonable steps within the sphere of where they operate. And something that kind of has been used as a yardstick in this is the McDonald's case. So McDonald's was obviously in the news for a variety of reasons. And they entered into a binding agreement with the EHRC on how to deal with sexual harassment in the workplace. And they had minors working in their establishments. They breached the agreement. And from that, we saw that there was a clear communication from the EHRC along the lines of what they considered to be reasonable steps. So these were clear communication of zero tolerance, regular risk assessments to identify hotspots, safeguarding younger and more vulnerable workers, robust procedures for handling complaints sensitively, active awareness of what is happening on the ground, and not just policies on paper. So those are kind of the clear guidelines that have been set at the moment, and we can draw on those as to what is reasonable. So at the moment, that's where we are, what we should be doing, and what we have to look forward to. Those are the key compliance issues. What all reasonable will end up meaning is a bit unclear at the moment. And I guess the message at the moment is clear, that the preventative duty is here, third-party harassment cannot be ignored, and risk assessments and training are really the cornerstone of compliance in this space. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that, Jaden. That was really, really informative, and I'm sure there's lots of questions to follow. In fact, I've written down a few myself, so we'll come back to you at the end of the Q&A time of the webinar. This takes us nicely to our next topic, which is the reality of unwanted behaviours on the shop floor in terms of the wider retail sector. We are joined by Lucy Wing, Policy Advisor at the British Retail Consortium, who's going to present the latest compelling statistics from the BRC's own crime survey, the latest survey, highlighting the prevalence of violence, abuse, and other unwanted and harmful behaviours that retail workers face on a daily basis. And she's going to help us better understand the scale of the challenge and the impact that that challenge has on workforces. Lucy, we're delighted to have you with us, and over to you.
Thanks, Arad. Good morning, everyone. It's great to be with you today. So I'm Lucy Wing, Policy Advisor at the British Retail Consortium, where I lead on retail crime. So yeah, this morning I'll just be talking you through some of the key findings from our latest crime survey. Insights I'm sure will resonate with many of the challenges that you're seeing on the ground in your own stores. Just very quickly, for any of you that aren't familiar with the British Retail Consortium, we are the go-to trade association for UK retail business. And our mission is to make a positive difference to retail, its customers and communities today and in the future. If we can move to the next slide. So the membership comprises over 200 major retailers operating either physical stores, multi-channel or pure play online, plus thousands of smaller independent retailers are represented through a number of trade associations that are themselves members of the BRC. And then the next slide just shows how we deliver value to our members through our community structure. So our communities are kind of the key mechanism that we use to engage with our members. This is how we provide timely, relevant, actionable insights to support their businesses. So we currently have 13 communities. Retail crime sits within our operations community, where it sits as kind of the top priority. We engage with our members in a variety of ways, including kind of dedicated online hubs, newsletters, monthly calls, and so on. Anyway, that's enough about us. So the BRC's annual crime survey is a critical source of evidence that underpins our campaigning, our engagement with government, police, and the media. The survey is the single largest and most reliable barometer of the state of retail crime. Our most recent survey, which I'm going to talk about today, covers the period from the 1st of September 2023 to the 31st of August 2024. I'm aware these figures are slightly out of date now. However, our 2026 survey will be released early in the new year. Just for some context, it is based on a sample from retailers representing over 1.1 million employees and over 194 billion market turnover. So first, looking at retailers' biggest concerns, when asked to identify the biggest threats to their business over the next 2 years, 88% place violence against staff in their top 3 concerns. This was followed by customer theft at 79%, and then fraud came in third. Violence against staff and theft have consistently remained top priorities for retailers over the years and are therefore kind of the main focus of the report. Next slide, please. So the survey results showed yet again high levels of violence and abuse, which continue to climb way beyond the exceptional levels seen during the pandemic lockdowns. There were over 2,000 incidents of violence and abuse against retail staff each day, so that total was 737,000 for the year. This marks a 49% increase from the previous year, when there were around 1,300 incidents a day. And it was nearly treble the last pre-pandemic figure of 455 in 2019, so confirming kind of a significant increase over time. Incidents of violence and abuse have increased in all locations, so that includes shopping centres, retail parks, but especially for inner city locations. Just breaking it down, the biggest rise has been in incidents of abuse, which reached 696,000, which is around 1,906 per day. This represents a 60% increase compared to previous years. And then in terms of physical violence, there were 45,000 violent incidents over the year, which is about 124 each day. Alarmingly as well, weapons were used in 25,000 of those cases, which is an 180% increase from the previous year. Two of the most common triggers for these attacks are staff asking for ID to verify age, or when they intervene to stop someone suspected of stealing. In response, retailers issued 401,000 banning orders over the year, which is a 146% increase. And there were 1.1 million incidents of antisocial behaviour recorded. So all of this really highlights the scale and seriousness of the issue facing retail staff today. So I'll quickly run through some of the broader statistics. Of all the incidents of violence and abuse reported by retailers, fewer than 1 in 3 were actually reported to the police. The main reasons for not reporting were a lack in confidence that it would make any difference, and also just a lack of staff time. Even when incidents were reported, only 10% led to police attendance and just 2% resulted in conviction. So all of this kind of points to a system that is failing to deliver justice and deterrence. Theft and violence, abuse and aggression are closely connected. When potential shoplifters are challenged, situations often escalate into aggression, a trend that retailers reported as increasing in the survey. Customer theft has reached its highest level ever, along with rising costs of crime prevention. For an industry already operating on tight margins, these increased expenses mean less money is available to invest in lower prices or store improvements. So the total financial impact of crime, including both actual losses and prevention costs, reached 4.2 billion. That's a 24% increase from 3.3 billion in the previous year. An effective police response is essential to reducing incidents of violence and abuse. It encourages reporting, supports successful prosecutions and convictions, and helps law enforcement accurately track crime trends and allocate resources where they're needed most. However, the survey indicates that despite some pockets of excellence, overall progress has been really limited. 61% of retailers rated the police response as poor or very poor, which is the same as last year. And just 2/5 gave a positive rating as excellent, good, or fair. So now just taking a closer look at the real impact behind those figures on colleagues. Violence and abuse against shop workers has been a long-standing concern for the BRC and our members. While most incidents involve verbal abuse rather than physical attacks, the impact is far from harmless. Verbal abuse can cause lasting emotional harm, sometimes just as severe as physical violence. It takes many forms, including racial or sexual harassment, intimidation, threats, etc. Even a seemingly minor confrontation can have a serious emotional toll. The effects on shop workers' well-being are clear. According to Retail Trust Health of Retail Report 2024, 78% of retail workers reported a decline in their mental health, and 49% of managers have seen an increase in absences due to this. 1 in 10 employees feel their work environment is unsafe, and nearly 1/3 of those who experience customer abuse say it affected their sense of safety at work. Also, the BRC's Diversity and Inclusion Survey showed that feeling happy at work is not a sentiment that is shared widely across the retail workforce. The Inclusion Index score dropped from 7.1 in 2024 to 6.6, indicating a worsening environment. The impact of external factors, such as being subject to violence and abuse in the workplace, was mentioned as potential contributing factors towards dissatisfaction. And then looking at the business impact, shop workers are often vulnerable, and many are women, teenagers, or older people returning to work. Rising levels of violence and sexual harassment are making retail a less attractive career option, particularly for women. So 13% of female retail employees have personally experienced or witnessed sexual harassment, and this is directly discouraging applications for shop floor roles. There are also serious consequences for retention. The 2024 UK Retail Worker Safety Report found that 1 in 4 retail employees have considered quitting due to fears of safety. So retailers have introduced a wide range of measures, not only to meet their legal obligations, but also just to protect the well-being of their colleagues. Most have robust policies in place to protect and support affected staff, and these are regularly reviewed to ensure they remain relevant. Retailers are investing in protective measures such as security guards, CCTV, body-worn cameras, or discrete alert devices. They're also using risk mapping based on crime data to be able to kind of guide security investment. Training is being expanded with short practical resources like bite-sized videos on real-life scenarios such as shoplifting, customer aggression, and responding to harassment. Internal comms are used to highlight training resources, support national campaigns like Usdaws Respect for Shop Workers Week, and deliver consistent messaging across stores. Retailers are also improving comms to encourage instant reporting, clarifying how to report, and encouraging managers to submit statements on behalf of their staff. Retailers also offer emotional, practical, legal, and financial support, often in partnership with organisations like the Retail Trust and Usdaw. And finally, many retailers are upgrading their internal reporting systems to improve data quality and response times. These systems help track reported and potential incidents, identify patterns, and ensure that risks are assessed thoroughly across the business. And then finally, at the BRC, we have a robust programme of engagement to support our members on crime. So through our operations community, we continue to lobby for stronger protections and better support for retail staff. Our primary policy focus at the moment is securing the inclusion of delivery drivers in the proposed standalone offence for assaulting retail workers under the Crime and Policing Bill. More broadly, we advocate for clearer crime statistics specific to retail, which are essential for effective resource allocation, and a police commitment to respond to all incidents, especially where a perpetrator has been detained or violence is involved. Then our monthly member calls provide a platform for retailers to share best practice, which enables them to kind of benchmark and continually improve their approaches. And then we also collaborate closely with Usdaw and Retail Trust to support retail colleagues affected by crime or workplace incidents. On the HR front, as we're engaging with the government as the Employment Rights Bill progresses through Parliament to ensure its duties are practical and proportionate. While retailers support the bill to prevent workplace harassment, the requirement for employees to take all reasonable steps to prevent such behaviour must be workable in retail environments. This is particularly important if customers are classified as third parties. Employers obviously have limited control over customer actions and can't always predict when inappropriate behaviour may occur. And then as part of our D&I charter, we help retailers build respectful, inclusive cultures, encouraging clear policies, open conversations, and safer workplaces for all. A workshop earlier this year focused on sexual harassment prevention and featured kind of legal insights and peer discussions on best practices. But that's all from me. I will hand back to Arad.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Lucy. I mean, that was informative and emotive, but also it was quite shocking in terms of the stats. And I think we all witness it when we're out and about ourselves in retail settings. We see people becoming irate towards customers, and we see the antisocial behaviour, but you don't really quite imagine the extent of it being as severe as what we've just seen here. Thank you for sharing those with us. Time to move on to our next speaker. Lucy will come back to you, I'm sure, with some questions. We have John Seven with us, retail specialist at PeopleSafe, who has joined us to discuss leveraging technology for reasonable steps. And John will be presenting a case study to demonstrate how a large supermarket is using personal safety technology to fulfill their reasonable steps under the Worker Protection Act duty. John, it's great to have you with us, and over to you.
Thanks very much, Arad. And I just wanted to sort of echo, Lucy, you raised some really interesting points there, in particular around, violence towards staff and also the perception and the realities of poor police performance. I think at present, retailers are focusing on staff well-being across the board. As a recruitment and retention tool, safety becomes a really big part of that. Employees expect to feel safe at work, and also they need to feel like their employer is making tangible steps to actually make that happen. So what I want to talk to you about today is about how we can leverage technology to make a meaningful impact to your employees' lives, both at work and also with what other retailers are focusing on these days as well, is traveling to and from. So Who are we? PeopleSafe are the largest personal safety technology provider in the world. You can see some of the organisations that we work with here from the retail sector, but we cross all ranges of sectors. We currently monitor through our own dedicated alarm receiving centre 330,000 people. These are employees of workforces that are either lone working or vulnerable workers when they're out working in the community, or in retail, whether they are working in a store on their own or with colleagues, or when they're travelling to and from work as part of their job or on their commute. I think what I wanted to sort of mention here as well is that the main reason those organisations that you saw there have selected us as a supplier is because our solution allows your users, your employees, to report an incident at the push of a button. We know who they are, where they are, what's going on, who to call in an emergency, and to get them the help they need when they need it. But also, where necessary, we can also bypass 999 using our own unique reference numbers, which means that we can actually offer a guaranteed level 1 police response. And that's whether it's from a dedicated device or from a personal safety app that could be downloaded by employees. I think we've had quite a few statistics today from both Lucy and Catherine as well around the state of play. I think that one of the other places that I'd encourage you to explore would be through a survey which we commissioned in 2022 called the Safety Gap Report. It was the first of its kind in that we commissioned the report to be surveying 3,000 organisations, both their employees and the employers, to understand what people's perception of risk was on the shop floor, but also what the employer's perception of their responsibility was. And one of the things that I wanted to just pull out is that at the moment, this is probably worse now than it was before, 60% of people surveyed felt unsafe on public transport during unsociable times. This is further compounded by the British Transport Police statistic, which is the next slide. They also reported that 33% of women have been sexually harassed while commuting. And when I've shared this statistic in the past, the most shocking part of that isn't that it happens, because we know it does. Misogyny has risen. Abuse and aggression that's overt has risen. But most offences happen between 5 p.m. and 7 p.m. when public transport is busiest. That's a really interesting point, and I think there's social science behind that that could be explored. But this is just really to state that while most retailers have very good security measures in that store environment, there's potential gaps in that risk for getting people from the door to the shop floor and vice versa on their commutes home. The result of this is that people are feeling less safe. Our lone worker safety report, which was commissioned just a couple of weeks ago, and it's available to you to download if you want, cited that 1 in 5 employees are now less productive due to feeling unsafe. And there's a classic retail quote there, you know, a customer threatened to wait for me and kill me after my shift. This is something that criminals and aggressors are starting to realise, is that the store environment is very well covered with facial recognition, CCTV, lots of people around. There's nothing easier for a criminal to say to somebody than, don't worry, I'll get you after work. And that feeling of being unsafe doesn't just last the shift. It doesn't just last that one journey. It changes people's patterns of behaviour moving forward on how they mitigate their own risk. Next slide. A couple of those impacts that I wanted to just focus on around well-being and performance is that 1 in 4 people that were surveyed across a number of different surveys said that they would actively change their behaviour to avoid unsafe situations. And we're not talking about being more polite in the high street or more polite on the trains. We're talking about people asking their parents to drive them to work. They're asking for taxis home from the store environment. They are changing their routes. They're changing a lot of behaviours so that they've got keys on them, they've got their phone out. And actually, having your phone out in this situation could actually make it worse. It becomes a target of theft at the same time. 46% of people surveyed avoid working late due to personal safety fears. We know that retailers now more than ever are asking their staff to extend their hours to support the business so that you can maximise profits, especially during peak hours and peak months. But are colleagues safe enough to do that? Are they safe on an October's evening when it's dark, getting kicked out of the leaving their retail environment at the same time that pubs are kicking out. You know, waiting for a cab, waiting for a bus with people that are drunk, using drugs, with vagrancy and homelessness in the high streets. We know that there's more chance of them being persecuted or abused in those darker hours. And the result is that people are leaving the sector, people are leaving jobs in general across the board where safety concerns are prioritised. 1 in 4 people left a job due to safety concerns in the last 5 years. And I think if we made that less general and pushed that towards what is going on in the retail space, I think if we're honest with ourselves, that's probably quite a lot higher. So what on earth are we doing here, sort of preaching to you about all of this? You know this more than most. I think that what we wanted to say is that there is a solution out there, and it can be technology. Lucy rightly pointed out that training, policy, and procedure is very important, but providing people with the ability to raise an alarm when they need it, push of a button, we know who they are and where they are, and we can manage an alarm in line with your expectations. So instead of you finding out on a Monday morning that a colleague got attacked on a Friday, you can know about it on that Friday, and better still, handle that situation and support their family. The result of that is people are more likely to stay in your work environment because they feel they can trust you. That's the alarm. I want to talk to you specifically about Travel Safe. It's a unique tool that we created probably about 2 years ago now, which allows for your staff to plug in their journey and feel safe until they get home. I'm going to show you a short video now while I'm talking you through it, just so to explain how it works. You can see that the app is available on either Android or iOS. You set your destination within this app. You can choose whatever that will be, and it's just going to show you now. It can use mapping. You can move that pin around if you needed to. You can search for specific locations that you want to travel to. What you do next is you can add on your mode of transport. That can be anything from walking, cycling, public transport, driving, and you can even include additional welfare checks as well, so that you are checked upon through our system to make sure that your journey is going to plan. What actually occurs is once you've started this journey and created your plan, that sits within our servers. It's not accessed or listened to unless the timed activity for that time period for that journey reaches 0 and you don't make it to that location. To be clear though, if you did make it to that location within that allotted time period, which you can see on screen now, it would just close down automatically. Google technology, mapping technology recognizes that you've arrived, and there's nothing else for your user to worry about. But if they don't make it to that location, notifications start to go to your users, and they will also get a call from us as an ARC, an alarm receiving center, to check and make sure that they're okay. And if they're not, then of course we will start to build that escalation plan and contact you or the emergency services where required. So I've got a couple of examples of where this is deployed. New Look not only have protected their key holders and store staff with our physical device technology in store, acting as a mobile panic alarm, so to speak. They've also given 750 of their staff access to the mobile app with Travel Safe feature. And Catherine makes a really good statement here. And I think this kind of echoes across most retailers that live by their core values. We want all staff to feel safe as possible at all times, not just during work hours, but also when they're making their way to and from work using public transport or walking on their own. The People Safe app provides this additional layer of security, safety, and reassurance. But the latest one that I wanted to talk to you about is actually Tesco's. Tesco's recently announced that they are launching a brand new travel campaign to provide additional safety protection to over 300,000 of their staff across the UK. And they're doing this as a free benefit. One of the things that we found really telling about this deployment was that it not only met their core values, but it also involved a range of departments. It wasn't led by loss prevention. It wasn't led by security. It wasn't led by HR or people. It involved all of those teams. And by coming together and exploring how best to change the perception of risk at staff level, they see that as demonstrable as to how they can affect recruitment and retention across their workforce. Not only does it show them as a leader in what they do, it shows that they're used to using technology, they're empowering their staff to control their own safety to and from work, but they also have some kind of measure in place to be responsible for that, in line with the latest news from the Worker Protection Act and others. Next slide. So the results of deploying a technology like this are pretty clear. For one, you know where your employees are at all times. And I'm not saying that from a tracking perspective. You don't have to have access to tracking, but what you do get is peace of mind. If somebody needs to raise an alarm, they can do that discreetly through the app features and functions, or they can manage their own travel through TravelSafe. So you no longer have to have those sleepless nights. You will get an alarm that will reach you if the need requires it, if an incident requires it. But ultimately, the best thing about this is it keeps your workers safe wherever and whenever they are. They could be using this on a Friday night going home from a pub. They could be using this when they're walking their dog on a Sunday afternoon and someone's trying to steal their animal, right? It's available to them 24/7, 365, and it does become a true employee well-being benefit. So we know that safety has huge impacts on feelings of working for an employer, and if you can change that perception of risk at safety level when they're traveling, then I believe that you've truly covered a significant gap in potential duty of care. But if you were thinking about deploying technology and thinking, well, of course, technology has a cost, we want to let you know that this has a proven track record in driving productivity and retention. We also, following our survey that we ran in 2022, we have used the statistics from that to pull together what's called a recruitment and retention calculator. You as an organization can plug in your own recruitment and retention statistics, costs, and then you will also see, based on your sector, what the benefit to you would be in return for deploying a technology like this app. So hopefully it ends up washing its own face. That's pretty much it from me, I believe.
Brilliant, fantastic. Yeah, we're at the Q&A stage there. Thank you so much, John, for that. That was very informative. It certainly resonates. The violence creates trauma, but even in the absence of actual physical violence, I do completely agree with your point in those threats and threatening behavior, that those gestures tend to really dig in, and in terms of psychological and emotional trauma, they're much longer lasting, and they do lead to huge staff turnovers and so forth. And I do agree, certainly the work that you do and we do is around that empowerment of employees to be able to assess, mitigate, and manage risks rather than avoid them and avoid thinking about them, so that hopefully they're better prepared to be able to deal with them. So thank you for that. We do have some questions that have come up. I'm going to put a question to every panel member, and then there will be more questions if we have time to be able to cover. If not, we'll cover those in the follow-up email. So Catherine, can I come to you first and just ask you, what message does the Act coming into force send about society's expectations of employers?
I think somebody, one of the panelists, talked about this zero tolerance approach. Lots of retailers know how to set up safe systems of work, whether that's the cashing up procedure, whether that's the locking up procedure, or other things that staff do. And we need to apply that same methodology about understanding the risks, creating a safety culture that includes the behaviours of other people, and making sure that staff understand that they need to comply with these expectations, but also empower other members of staff to call stuff out. And I think one of the things, it's about that huge culture change, that not only do we not tolerate abuse from members of the public towards our staff, that we won't allow that internally, and that everyone feels really confident because of the training they've received, because of what they see going on around them, that it's okay to question what's going on and it's okay to report it. So I think it's a huge shift. And I think one of the things I'm really aware of, I was on a call yesterday about a violence against women and girls strategy from a London borough, and every woman who spoke from an ethnic minority talked about the uptick in abuse and harassment they are receiving just trying to get to work, that they are being shouted at in the street, that they are being jostled on buses. And I think we all have that absolute duty of care that we need to understand, you know, potentially, particularly for our ethnic minority staff, that they might already be traumatized before they even enter our premises. And we need to make sure that they feel able to talk about that we will support them, and that we recognize that we need to effectively support our teams in work and out of work. I could go on, but I'll stop.
Aaron, you're on mute, sorry.
I do apologize. Thank you for that, Catherine. I was just saying that sort of also highlights the essentiality of more bystander action, both in public spaces, but also, you know, within retail places. When we're there, when we see someone being irate and so forth, to be able to maybe safely intervene and stop those things from progressing. Thank you for that. Jodie, if I can come to you and ask you, what do you think are the sort of the common compliance gaps or misunderstandings that retailers should be aware of?
I think that could be an hour-long talk in itself, but I think that there is probably the one thing that I hear the most, or the compliance gap that I hear talked about the most, is that a lot of employers will come to me and say, so we can't do anything, so we're not allowed to banter, so we're not allowed to do this, we're not allowed to do that. And I think that the misconception there and the compliance gap there is that there has been a shift to recognizing that, you know, while you're bantering in this corner, someone else is being sexually harassed in another, and they don't have the ability or the voice to stand up because they're in a sexually charged environment, or they haven't been given the right tools, they don't know where to go or how to go, they feel isolated and alone. So I think that the purpose of this legislation, and as everyone has kind of spoken to, is really making sure that, I think, from the bottom up, people feel empowered. And that's the compliance gaps that we see coming through the most, is that there is not enough being done from the bottom up and being shown through the kind of the lived values of organizations, so that it kind of pervades through the culture of an organization, to the point where people understand and feel that they can bring issues to light, and that they won't be ridiculed, they won't be further harassed, they won't be victimized. So I think that the key takeaway, compliance starts from the bottom, and it's a living thing that needs to be zero tolerance, and it needs to kind of stick to the principles that are enshrined in the company, and there can't be any deviations or special treatments or anything like that. I think you're on mute again.
Sorry, I need to leave a reminder for myself. Apologies. If I could also ask you, is there a need for organizations to have a separate standalone sexual harassment policy? Could that be a part of other wider policies? And also, in terms of, we know what it's like, you know, you get into a workplace and you're given access to workplace policies. People don't always sit down and read every single policy. So in terms of ensuring that there is effective policy in place, but also ensuring that people have read, understood, and implementing, you know, what are any tips that you might have for employers in terms of not just having a policy at archiving, but actually putting it into practice?
Yeah, so I mean, you need to have policies. I think that the starting point is there needs to be a sexual harassment policy or harassment policy. I think, you know, a lot of employers come to me and say, well, we're a small organization, there's just one or two of us, or, you know, we don't have these problems. And you can draft policies as simple as 1 or 2 pages. You can have policies in place that cater for the specific organization, and that's what you need. But something that we have to bear in mind is that if you look at the legislation, it uses the word must take steps to prevent. So it's an absolute duty. There is no wiggle room around it. We need to take these steps. And in terms of getting the policies across, making sure that people understand it, it goes back to those 8 steps. It's engaging your staff, making sure that they understand where to find these things if they do need them. And it will be the case that it won't always be front of mind, but you know, in a 20-year, 30-year, 40-year career, there will be times, both male and female, that you'll want to have regard to those. So they need to know where to find them in instances where those questions arise. And then to the other point that I spoke about is making sure that you train your staff correctly. So make sure they know what the policies of their company say, where their policies say you should do, where the reporting structures end up, and how show a clear line of progression from this is what happened to this is what the ultimate outcome was.
Wonderful. Thank you for answering that question and clarifying that further, Jaden. Lucy, if I can come to you, again, really enjoyed the presentation, and as I said, some of it was shocking for me in terms of, you know, the level of violence and some of the incident rates and the numbers and so forth. How does that data help retailers make a stronger business case for action, but essentially for investments?
Yeah, this is definitely a question that we get a lot. Obviously, kind of understanding and using data on retail crime levels helps retailers make a stronger business case for action. It turns what might look like isolated events into kind of clear, measurable trends. So with that solid data, whether that's theft rates, whether that's incidents of violence, regional crime patterns, you can kind of really demonstrate the real impact on your bottom line, staff well-being, customer experience. So ultimately, the evidence allows retailers to kind of justify investments into prevention measures. I guess from our perspective, as I said earlier, the crime survey is kind of a critical source of evidence. It underpins our campaigning and engagement with police, with government, and also with the media. So it kind of really allows us to advocate for support from law enforcement and from local authorities.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that, Lucy. I'm conscious of time. John, I'd like to just come to you with a question regarding your presentation. With shrinking budgets, how can retailers justify the cost of investing in personal safety tech? John?
Yeah, I think I'd probably chip in on the back of what Lucy was saying there. You know, the statistics are quite clear, right? But I think that reality is one thing, but perception of risk is the thing that's damaging staff well-being, right? And that might not be the truth, it might be exacerbated. So I would really encourage retailers to survey your own staff on their perception of risk. Where are your gaps? Once you know what people think your responsibilities should be and where their risks are, you can start to plug those gaps more effectively. And if you needed to have access to it, we can provide from the safety gap survey that we ran in 2022, those survey questions are available to anybody on this call to then recycle or reinvent, to cast it out to your own teams, just to get a grip of what it looks like on the ground floor in reality. And then once you've got that, you can take these kind of proven solutions that have demonstrable benefits around recruitment and retention, especially around apps as an employee benefit. And you can work out quite clearly that it washes its own face, as I said before.
Wonderful, thanks, John. So we're talking about employees better understanding that sort of the wider employee risk profile, and then finding solutions that are tailor-made to address those needs in particular.
I think so, but also on the back of that, I think you want to gauge what their expectation of the organisation is as well. They want to know what the people on the ground floor are saying about the business's own core values and how they meet them, and whether or not the business is really putting those necessary steps in place to mitigate risks, not just in the store, but outside of store as well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that. We do have some additional questions. I'm conscious of time, it's 11 o'clock, and I don't want to run over massively. So we will put those questions that we haven't covered today to our panelists and sort of give you an update on the follow-up email. This leads me to say thank you for joining us today and for engaging in this important conversation about the Worker Protection Act. I hope the guidance that our presenters have shared has given you clarity, confidence, and obviously certainly some practical steps to take back to your organizations. Please remember that compliance isn't just about meeting the legal requirements. By what we've heard today, we know that it's much more about creating safer, dignified, more respectful workplaces for everyone. So on behalf of the Trust and People Safe, I'd like to thank our speakers and all of you for participating. And as a reminder, the recording will be shared with you. Straight after this, you'll receive the full, and then a few days down the line, you receive the shorter snippets of it. If you'd like further support, whether it's training, consultancy, safer technology, or legal advice and so forth, please don't hesitate to get in touch with us. The follow-up email will include all the details, contact details. So thank you again, and I wish you all a safe and successful rest of your day. Goodbye.